Optimism is a mental attitude or worldview that interprets situations and events as being best, meaning that in some way for factors that may not be fully comprehended, the present moment is in an optimum state. The concept is typically extended to include the attitude of hope for future conditions unfolding as optimal as well. The more broad concept of optimism is the understanding that all of nature, past, present and future, operates by laws of optimization along the lines of Hamilton's principle of optimization in the realm of physics. This understanding, although criticized by counter-views such as pessimism, idealism and realism, leads to a state of mind that believes everything is as it should be, and that the future will be as well. A common idiom used to illustrate optimism versus pessimism is a glass with water at the halfway point, where the optimist is said to see the glass as half full, but the pessimist sees the glass as half empty. The word is originally derived from the Latin optimum, meaning best. Being optimistic, in the typical sense of the word, ultimately means one expects the best possible outcome from any given situation. This is usually referred to in psychology as dispositional optimism. Researchers sometimes operationalize the term differently depending on their research, however. For example, Martin Seligman and his fellow researchers define it in terms of explanatory style, which is based on the way one explains life events. As for any trait characteristic, there are several ways to evaluate optimism, such as various forms of the life orientation test, for the original definition of optimism, or the attributional style questionnaire designed to test optimism in terms of explanatory style. While the heritability of optimism is largely debatable, most researchers agree that it seems to be a biological trait to some small degree, but it is also thought that optimism has more to do with environmental factors, making it a largely learned trait. It has also been suggested that optimism could appear to be a hereditary trait because it is actually a manifestation of combined traits that are mostly heritable, like intelligence, temperament and alcoholism. Optimism may also be linked to health. Explanatory style. Explanatory style is different, though related to, the more traditional, narrower definition of optimism. This broader concept is based on the theory that optimism and pessimism are drawn from the particular way people explain events. There are three dimensions within typical explanations, which include internal versus external, stable versus unstable, and global versus specific. Optimistic justifications toward negative experiences are attributed to factors outside the self, are not likely to occur consistently, and are limited specific life domains. Positive experiences would be optimistically labeled as the opposite, internal, stable, global. There is much debate about the relationship between explanatory style and optimism. Some researchers argue that there is not much difference at all. Optimism is just the lay term for what scientists call explanatory style. Others argue that explanatory style is exclusive to its concept and should not be interchangeable with optimism. It is generally thought that, though they should not be used interchangeably, dispositional optimism and explanatory style are at least marginally related. Ultimately, the problem is simply that more research must be done to either define a bridge, or further differentiate between these concepts. Philosophical optimism. Philosophers often link the concept of optimism with the name of Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who held that we live in the best of all possible worlds, or that God created a physical universe that applies the laws of physics, which Voltaire famously mocked in his satirical novel Candide. The philosophical pessimism of William Godwin demonstrated perhaps even more optimism than Leibniz. He hoped that society would eventually reach the state where calm reason would replace all violence and force, that mind could eventually make matter subservient to it, and that intelligence could discover the secret of immortality. Panglossianism. The term Panglossianism describes baseless optimism of the sort exemplified by the beliefs of Pangloss from Voltaire's Candide, which are the opposite of his fellow traveller Martin's pessimism and emphasis on free will. The phrase Panglossian pessimism has been used to describe the pessimistic position that, since this is the best of all possible worlds, it is impossible for anything to get any better. The Panglossian paradigm is a term coined by Stephen Jay Gould and Richard Lewontin to refer to the notion that everything has specifically adapted to suit specific purposes. Instead, They argue, accidents and exaltation play an important role in the process of evolution. Some other scientists however argue the implication that many adaptionists are Panglossians is a straw man. Why people believe weird things, pseudoscience, superstition, and other confusions of our time. Michael Schimmer relates Frank J. Tippler to Voltaire's character Pangloss to show how clever people deceive themselves. Schimmer explores the psychology of scholars and businessmen who give up their careers in their pursuit to broadcast their paranormal beliefs. In his last chapter, added to the revised version, Schimmer explains that smart people can be more susceptible to believing in weird things. Optimalism, as defined by Nicholas Riescher, holds that this universe exists because it is better than the alternatives. While this philosophy does not exclude the possibility of a deity, it also doesn't require one, and is compatible with atheism. The positive psychologist Tal Ben-Shahar uses optimalism to mean willingness to accept failure while remaining confident that success will follow, a positive attitude he contrasts with negative perfectionism. Perfectionism can be defined as a persistent compulsive drive toward unattainable goals and valuation based solely in terms of accomplishment. Perfectionists reject the realities and constraints of human ability. They cannot accept failures, delaying any ambitious and productive behavior in fear of failure again. This neuroticism can even lead to clinical depression and low productivity. As an alternative to negative perfectionism, Ben-Shahar suggests the adoption of optimalism. Optimalism allows for failure in pursuit of a goal, and expects that while the trend of activity will tend towards the positive, it is not necessary to always succeed while striving to attain goals. This basis in reality prevents the optimalist from being overwhelmed in the face of failure. Optimalists accept failures and also learn from them, which encourages further pursuit of achievement. Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar believes that optimalists and perfectionists show distinct different motives. Optimalists tend to have more intrinsic, inward desires, with a motivation to learn. While perfectionists are highly motivated by a need to consistently prove themselves worthy. Assessment, Life Orientation Test. The Life Orientation Test was designed by Skyer and Carver, and is one of the more popular tests of optimism and pessimism. There are 8 measurements, with 4 positively and 4 negatively worded items. The LOT has been revised to say Euro once by the original creators and also by Chang, Maydew Olives, and Cirilla as the extended life orientation test. All 3 are most commonly used because they are based on dispositional optimism, which simply means expecting positive outcomes. Attributional Style Questionnaire. This attributional style questionnaire created by Peterson et al. Is based on the explanatory style definition of optimism. It lists 6 positive and negative events, and asks the respondents to record a possible cause for the event and rate the internality, stability, and globality of the event. An optimistic person is one who perceives good things happening to them as internal, stable, and global. There are several modified versions of the ASQ including the expanded attributional style questionnaire, the content analysis of verbatim explanations, and the ASQ designed for testing the optimism of children. Health research has emerged showing the relationships between several psychological constructs and health. Optimism is one of these concepts, and has been shown to explain between 5–10% of the variation in the likelihood of developing some health conditions, notably including cardiovascular disease, stroke, and depression. Furthermore, optimists have been shown to live healthier lifestyles which may influence disease. For example, optimists smoke less, are more physically active, consume more fruit, vegetables and whole grain bread, and consume more moderate amounts of alcohol. The relationship between optimism and health has also been studied with regards to physical symptoms, coping strategies and negative effect for those suffering from rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, and fibromyalgia. It has been found that among individuals with these diseases, optimists are not more likely than pessimists to report pain alleviation due to coping strategies, despite differences in psychological well-being between the two groups. A meta-analysis has confirmed the assumption that optimism is related to psychological well-being. OE put simply, optimists emerge from difficult circumstances with less distress than do pessimists. Furthermore, The correlation appears to be attributable to coping style, OE, that is, optimists seem intent on facing problems head-on, taking active and constructive steps to solve their problems. Pessimists are more likely to abandon their effort to attain their goals. It should be noted that research to date has demonstrated that optimists are less likely to have certain diseases or develop certain diseases over time. By comparison, research has not yet been able to demonstrate the ability to change an individual's level of optimism through psychological intervention, and thereby alter the course of disease or likelihood for development of disease. Though in that same vein, an article by Mayo Clinic lists steps that be taken to begin the shift from a negative to a positive optimistic outlook. In particular, the article focuses on changing self-talk from negative to positive. Some strategies include surrounding oneself with positive people, identifying areas of change, practice positive self-talk, being open to humor, and following a healthy lifestyle. The unique phenomenon of optimism leading to better health has been scientifically studied. In 2010, a group of researchers studied the results of 83 of these reports to look for any common findings. Once the researchers developed a consistent way to analyze the results of these different studies, they were able to show that optimism seemed to have a fairly remarkable impact on physical health. Whether an individual study looked at overall longevity, survival from a disease, heart health, immunity, cancer outcomes, pregnancy outcomes, pain tolerance, or another health topic, it seemed that those who had a more optimistic outlook performed better and had a better outcome than those who were pessimistic. The message is that having a positive attitude can boost a person's physical health, regardless of what might be ailing them. The researchers also noted that optimism seemed to have fairly consistent benefits for people regardless of demographic factors such as income level or overall health status. A recent meta-analysis of optimism supported past findings that optimism is positively correlated with life satisfaction, happiness, psychological and physical well-being, and negatively correlated with depression and anxiety. A number of studies have been done on optimism and psychological well-being. One study conducted by Aspinall and Taylor assessed incoming freshmen on a range of personality factors such as optimism, self-esteem, locus of self-control, etc. It was found that freshmen who scored high on optimism before entering college were reported to have lower levels of psychological distress than their more pessimistic peers, while controlling for the other personality factors. Over time, the more optimistic students were less stressed, less lonely, and less depressed than their pessimistic counterparts. Thus, this study suggests a strong link between optimism and psychological well-being. As for evidence for optimism, a unregistered trademark's impact on physical well-being, a recent study by Joel Jobin has shown that in our daily lives optimists tend to respond better to stress. In the study, it was found that pessimists generally have higher levels of cortisol and have trouble regulating it in response to stressors. Another study by Skyer examined the recovery process for a number of patients that had undergone surgery. The study showed that optimism was a strong predictor of the rate of recovery. Optimists achieved faster results in OE behavioral milestones such as sitting in bed, walking around, etc. They also were rated by staff as having a more favorable physical recovery. In a 6-month later follow-up, it was found that optimists were quicker to resume normal activities. See also, affirmations, agonism, mood, new thought, optimism bias, pessimism, self-efficacy, philosophy, philosophy of happiness, positive psychology, Pruno-Iyer, references. Mayo Clinic staff. Positive thinking, stop negative self-talk to reduce stress. mayoclinic.org. Mayo Clinic, March 4, 2014. Web March 31, 2014. Further reading, Chang, E. Optimism and Pessimism, Implications for Theory, Research, and Practice, Washington, D.C., American Psychological Association. ISBN 1-55798-691-6. Huseman, Michael H., and Joyce A. Huseman. Techno-Physics, Why Technology Won a Unregistered Trademark to Save Us or the Environment, Chapter 7, A OE Technological Optimism and Belief in Progress. A New Society Publishers, Gabriela Island, British Columbia, Canada, ISBN 0865717044, 464 pp. Sligman, MEP. Learned Optimism, How to Change Your Mind and Your Life, Vintage, ISBN 1400078,393. Sharot, Tali. The Optimism Bias, A Tour of the Irrationally Positive Brain, Vintage, ISBN 9780307473516. External links, Being Optimistic. Optimism as Character Strength, Ehrenreich, Barbara. Bright-Sided, How Positive Thinking is Undermining America. Picador. PA 256. ISBN A9780312658854. Retrieved July 29, 2013. A.